Sarah Mitchell never planned on becoming the spark that would burn down an empire of corruption. Standing in the Pine Grove diner that fateful evening, watching her 8-year-old son's chocolate milk arc through the air in slow motion, she couldn't have known that this simple accident would expose the dark rot at the heart of their quiet suburban town. The Steel Reapers weren't just another motorcycle gang. They were kings here, their chrome thrones bought with blood money and police badges. As their enforcer, Vince towered over her terrified son, his leather vest still dripping with spilled milk. Sarah felt her world shrinking to a single, horrifying moment. The other customers looked away, already knowing how this story usually ended. The Steel Reapers hadn't earned their reputation for mercy. But these men, who thought they owned Pine Grove, who believed they could break anyone, had made a fatal miscalculation. They saw a struggling single mom working 2 jobs. They never imagined they were about to awaken a war machine. They hadn't counted on the combat-hardened Navy SEAL who would tear apart heaven and earth to protect his sister's family. And Ryan Blake was about to teach them that some threats come with consequences that no amount of corrupt cops or criminal connections could stop. Some lessons are written in blood. And class was about to begin. Just before we get back to it, I'd love to know where you're watching from today. And if you're enjoying these stories, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow's special episode is one you definitely don't want to miss. The harsh buzz of Sarah Mitchell's alarm pierced the pre-dawn darkness. 5:30 a.m. Her hand fumbled to silence it before the sound could wake Ethan. For a precious moment, she allowed herself to remain curled beneath the warmth of her thin blanket, stealing a few more seconds of rest before beginning another marathon day. "Mom, Mom." The alarm went off. Ethan's voice carried from the next room, full of energy despite the early hour. Sarah couldn't help but smile. So much for not waking him. "Coming, sweetheart," she called back, swinging her legs out of bed. The wooden floor was cold beneath her feet. They'd have to keep the heat lower this month. The utility bill had been higher than expected. Sarah padded down the narrow hallway of their small rental house, pausing to peek into Ethan's room. Her 8-year-old son was already up, arranging his collection of action figures on the carpet. The toys were well-worn but cherished, especially the Navy SEAL figures that reminded him of the uncle he'd never met in person. "Look, Mom." Ethan held up his favorite figure. "Uncle Ryan's going on another secret mission." Sarah's heart twinged at the mention of her brother. "That's great, honey. But right now, your mission is getting ready for school. Race you to the bathroom." The morning routine was a carefully choreographed dance they'd perfected over the past 5 years, ever since Mark's death and Sarah had taken on her second job. While Ethan brushed his teeth, she laid out his clothes. While he dressed, she packed his lunch, peanut butter and jelly today, with an apple she'd been saving for him. While he ate breakfast, she got herself ready, applying minimal makeup and pulling her dark hair into a practical ponytail. "Mom, can I have more cereals?" Ethan asked, holding up his empty bowl. Sarah glanced at the nearly empty cereal box, mentally calculating their grocery budget. "Not today, sweetie. We need to save some for tomorrow. How about a banana instead?" Ethan's face fell slightly, but he nodded. Sarah's stomach clenched, not just from hunger, but from the guilt of having to say no to such a simple request. She'd skip lunch again today, she decided. It would help stretch their food budget a little further. "Ready for launch?" she asked, forcing cheerfulness into her voice as she grabbed her purse and Ethan's backpack. "Ready." Ethan saluted, a gesture he'd picked up from studying photos of his Uncle Ryan in uniform. They hurried out to the driveway, where Sarah's old Honda Civic waited, its faded blue paint catching the first hints of dawn. The car had seen better days, but Sarah couldn't bring herself to replace it, even if she could afford to. Mark had bought it for her just before they got married, proud to give her first new car. Now, 5 years after the accident that took him from them, the Honda remained one of her strongest connections to her late husband. "Good morning, old friend," she whispered, running her hand along the hood as she had countless times before. The metal was cool beneath her palm, and for a moment she could almost feel Mark's presence, could almost hear him teasing her about talking to cars. The engine coughed to life on the second try. "Seatbelt?" Sarah checked the rearview mirror. "Check." Ethan clicked his belt, then resumed playing with his action figure. They wound through the quiet streets of Pine Grove, their small suburban town slowly coming to life around them. Sarah had grown up here, left for college, then returned with Mark when they were ready to start a family. It had seemed like the perfect place to raise children, safe, friendly, with good schools and a strong sense of community. That was before the Steel Reapers arrived. The rumble of motorcycles drew her attention to the gas and go on the corner of Maple and Fifth. A group of bikers lounged around their machines, leather-clad figures wreathed in cigarette smoke. Their bikes gleamed in the early morning light, all chrome and menace. Sarah instinctively slowed down, not wanting to draw attention. But it was too late. One of the bikers noticed her car and revved his engine aggressively, the sudden roar causing her to jump. Laughter echoed across the parking lot. "Wow, their bikes are so loud," Ethan said from the back seat, eyes wide with excitement. "Yes, they are," Sarah replied carefully, accelerating past the gas station. In the rearview mirror, she could see several of the bikers watching her car, their expressions hidden behind mirrored sunglasses. She didn't relax until they'd turned the corner and the gas and go disappeared from view. After dropping Ethan off at Pine Grove Elementary, "Bye, Mom. Love you," Sarah headed to her first job at Carter Insurance, where she worked as a claims processor. The office was already buzzing when she arrived, and not just with the usual morning chatter. "Did you hear what happened at Mike's bar last night?" Lisa Zhang from accounting whispered as Sarah settled at her desk. The Reapers showed up and practically took over the place. Wouldn't let anyone leave until they'd paid their respects to their leader. "Paid their respects?" Sarah asked, logging into her computer. "Money," Lisa confirmed. "They're calling it a protection fee now. And get this, 2 cops were there the whole time just watching. Didn't do a thing." Sarah's fingers paused over her keyboard. "That's not possible. The police wouldn't just—" "Oh, honey." Lisa leaned closer. "Where have you been? Everyone knows the Reapers have friends in high places. Why do you think nobody can touch them?" The morning passed in a blur of insurance claims and worried conversations. Sarah tried to focus on her work, but her mind kept drifting to the bikers at the gas station, to the rumors of police corruption, to the growing knot of anxiety in her stomach. At 2:30, she left to pick up Ethan from school, then dropped him at Mrs. Henderson's house, a retired teacher who watched him during the gap between school and Sarah's evening shift at the diner. Today, however, Mrs. Henderson met her at the door with an apologetic expression. "I'm so sorry, dear, but I've got a terrible migraine coming on. I don't think I can watch Ethan today." Sarah's heart sank. She couldn't afford to miss her shift at the diner, but she had no backup childcare. "It's okay, Mrs. Henderson. Feel better. Come on, Ethan. Looks like you're coming to work with me today." The Pine Grove Diner sat on the corner of Main Street, its neon sign casting a cheerful glow in the gathering dusk. But Sarah's steps slowed as they approached. The Steel Reapers had claimed the diner as one of their regular hangouts, their motorcycles often lined up outside like chrome sentinels. Tonight was no exception. At least half a dozen bikes were parked in the lot, their owners visible through the large windows. Sarah gripped Ethan's hand tighter. "Mom, look at those motorcycles." Ethan tried to pull away for a closer look. "They're so cool. Uncle Ryan would love them." "Ethan, listen to me." Sarah knelt down to meet his eyes. "Those bikes might look cool, but the people who ride them aren't nice people. I need you to stay close to me inside, okay? No wandering around." "But why aren't they nice? They have awesome bikes." "Sometimes bad people can have nice things," Sarah explained, choosing her words carefully. "But that doesn't make them good people. Promise me you'll be careful." "I promise," Ethan said solemnly, though she could tell he didn't fully understand. Inside, Sarah hustled Ethan to a booth in the corner with his homework and some crayons, then quickly changed into her waitress uniform. Her section, thankfully, was on the opposite side of the diner from where the bikers sat, but she could still hear their loud voices, their crude jokes, the way they snapped their fingers to summon service. "Order up," Jerry, the short-order cook, called out. Sarah grabbed the plates, carefully navigating between tables. Each time she passed near the biker section, she could feel their eyes on her, could hear their conversations drop to meaningful whispers. The shift seemed endless. By closing time, Sarah's feet ached and her tips were less than usual. The bikers' presence tended to drive away regular customers. She counted out her earnings in the break room. $47. Not enough. Not nearly enough. Later that night, after tucking an exhausted Ethan into bed, Sarah sat at her small kitchen table with her bills spread out before her. The numbers refused to add up, no matter how many times she reworked her budget. Mortgage, utilities, groceries, Ethan's school supplies, the car insurance that was due next week. She'd already cut every corner she could think of. The thermostat was set as low as she dared with winter approaching. She hadn't bought new clothes for herself in over a year. Meals were planned with military precision to minimize waste. And still it wasn't enough. Sarah's gaze drifted to the photo hanging on her refrigerator. A young man in desert camouflage, his arm around a younger version of herself. Ryan, her big brother, the hero who'd always protected her growing up, until his own demons had driven him away. She hadn't spoken to him since Mark's funeral. Ryan had shown up in uniform, offered awkward condolences, then disappeared again into whatever shadow world Navy SEALs inhabited. She'd sent him photos of Ethan over the years, birthday cards, updates about their lives. Sometimes he sent postcards from exotic locations, or small gifts for Ethan. But he remained a ghost in their lives, present only in Ethan's action figures and Sarah's memories. Her hand reached for the phone, then pulled back. What would she even say? Hey, remember me? Your little sister? The town's being terrorized by a biker gang. I can barely feed your nephew. And I could really use my big brother right now. No. Ryan had made his choice to stay away. She would handle this on her own, just as she'd handled everything else since Mark died. She had to be strong. For Ethan, for herself, for the life they were building together. Sarah gathered the bills into a neat stack, tucking them into a folder labeled urgent. Tomorrow would be another early morning, another day of juggling work and motherhood, another test of her determination to give Ethan the life he deserved. But as she turned out the lights and checked the locks one final time, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that something was changing in Pine Grove. The rumble of motorcycles echoed in the distance, a sound that was becoming all too familiar in their once peaceful town. In the darkness of her bedroom, Sarah allowed herself a moment of weakness. I miss you, Ryan, she whispered to the night. We need you. Only silence answered. Sarah's ancient Honda wheezed as she pulled into the Pine Grove Diner's parking lot, the dashboard clock mockingly displaying 4:47 p.m. 17 minutes late for her shift. Her heart hammered against her ribs as she spotted the row of gleaming motorcycles parked in their usual spot. The Steel Reapers were already here. Remember what I said, Ethan? She adjusted her rearview mirror to meet her son's eyes. Stay in the booth and do my homework. Don't wander around. I know, Mom. Ethan clutched his backpack, his other hand wrapped around Captain Storm, the action figure he'd insisted on bringing despite her earlier objections. The autumn wind whipped Sarah's hair as she hurried around to help Ethan out of the car. A group of bikers lounged near the entrance, cigarette smoke creating a hazy barrier she'd have to walk through. She gripped Ethan's hand tighter, feeling his small fingers squeeze back. Well, look who finally showed up, drawled Rita, the head waitress, as Sarah rushed through the kitchen entrance. Table 6 has been waiting 10 minutes for their coffee refills. I'm sorry, Mrs. Henderson couldn't watch Ethan today, and save it for Jerry. Rita jerked her thumb toward the grill, where the cook was frantically flipping burgers. Just get changed and get out there. The Reapers are getting rowdy. Sarah hustled Ethan to her regular booth in the corner, quickly setting him up with his homework and a chocolate milk, a rare treat she hoped would keep him occupied. I'll check on you between orders, okay? Can I have fries too? Ethan's eyes lit up hopefully. Let's see how your math homework goes first. Sarah tied her apron with practiced movements, already scanning her section. Table 6 looked annoyed. Table 3 needed menus, and the bikers at Table 12 were stacking empty beer bottles into a pyramid. The next hour passed in a blur of coffee pots and order pads. Sarah fell into her familiar rhythm, weaving between tables with practiced efficiency. She'd learned to tune out the bikers' crude jokes and occasional catcalls, responding only with professional nods when required to take their orders. Mom, Mom. Ethan's excited voice cut through the diner's ambient noise. Look what I drew. Sarah glanced over to see her son waving a paper covered in colorful scribbles. Her heart warmed at his proud expression, then froze as she realized he was standing up, beginning to walk toward her with his chocolate milk in hand. Ethan, wait. Everything happened in slow motion. Ethan's sneaker caught on someone's outstretched boot. The chocolate milk arced through the air like brown rain. And there, rising from his seat with a roar of rage, stood Vincent Mad Dog Morrison, the Steel Reaper's most notorious enforcer. "You little shit," Vince bellowed, chocolate milk dripping down his leather vest. The diner fell silent except for the sizzle of grease on Jerry's grill. Sarah was already moving, her body operating on pure maternal instinct. "I'm so sorry." She grabbed napkins from a nearby dispenser, hands trembling as she tried to dab at Vince's vest. "It was an accident. He's just a child." "Back off." Vince shoved her hand away, his eyes burning with alcohol-fueled fury. The sudden movement sent Sarah stumbling backward, her hip catching the edge of a table. "Hey, Mad Dog, look." One of the other bikers pointed at Ethan's dropped action figure. "Kid's got himself a little soldier toy." Vince snatched up Captain Storm, his massive fingers nearly crushing the plastic figure. "Playing war games, are you?" He leaned down, his face inches from Ethan's. "Think you're some kind of tough guy." Tears welled in Ethan's eyes. "That's my Uncle Ryan. He's a Navy SEAL. He fights bad guys." A dangerous smile spread across Vince's face. "Navy SEAL, huh?" He straightened up, addressing his fellow gang members. "Hear that, boys? We got ourselves a real military family here." The other bikers rose from their seats, forming a loose circle around Sarah and Ethan. Regular customers began quietly gathering their things, leaving money on tables and slipping toward the exits. Rita disappeared into the kitchen. Even Jerry stopped flipping burgers, his spatula frozen mid-flip. "Please." Sarah stepped between Vince and her son, fighting to keep her voice steady. "He's just a little boy. I'll pay for your vest to be cleaned." "Oh, we're way past cleaning bills, sweetheart." Vince's eyes traveled over her with predatory intent. "But maybe we can work something out. Why don't you come sit with us, have a drink, show your kid what a real man looks like, not some jarhead uncle he's never even met." "I'd rather not." Sarah's voice was barely a whisper. "No." Vince's face hardened. "Too good for us. Is that it?" He looked around at his fellow gang members. "Princess here thinks she's too good for the Steel Reapers." "Mom." Ethan's small voice quivered behind her. "Get your things, honey. We're leaving." Sarah began backing toward their booth, keeping herself between Ethan and the bikers. "Leaving so soon?" Vince's boot crunched down on Captain Storm, the sound of breaking plastic cutting through the tense air. "But we're just getting to know each other." Sarah grabbed Ethan's backpack, her fingers fumbling with the straps. The other diners had all fled now, leaving only the gang members, who were exchanging knowing looks. Something was about to happen. She could feel it in the electrically charged air. "Nice car you got out there," Vince said conversationally, moving toward the window. "That old blue Honda, right? Must be what, 15 years old?" Sarah's blood ran cold. Mark had bought that car for her. It was one of the last pieces of him she had left. "Looks like it could use some improvements." Vince grinned, revealing tobacco-stained teeth. "Boys, why don't we show the lady our custom detailing service?" The gang moved as one toward the exit. Sarah clutched Ethan to her side, rooted to the spot as she watched through the diner's large windows. Vince approached her car first, pulling something from his jacket, a switchblade that caught the setting sun's light. "No." The word escaped her lips as the blade plunged in her front tire. The car seemed to sag, like a wounded animal. "Mom, what are they doing?" Ethan's voice cracked with fear. "Don't look, baby." Sarah tried to turn him away, but it was like watching a train wreck. She couldn't tear her eyes from the scene. More bikers surrounded the car now. One produced a baseball bat, testing its weight with practice swings. Another pulled out a can of spray paint, shaking it with theatrical flair. The sound of shattering glass made her jump as the bat connected with her windshield, sending spiderweb cracks across the surface. "Please stop." Sarah burst through the diner's doors, leaving Ethan inside. "That car, it's all I have." "All you have?" Vince paused in his systematic destruction to look at her. "Sweetheart, after tonight, you won't even have this piece of junk." The bat swung again and again. Glass tinkled to the pavement. Crude symbols appeared in blazing red paint across the hood and doors. Sarah watched as years of memories were destroyed in minutes. The dent in the passenger door from when Mark had backed into a pole. The baby on board sticker Ethan had begged her to keep long after he'd outgrown it. All of it disappeared under a layer of gang tags and vulgar graffiti. People walked past on the sidewalk, quickening their steps and averting their eyes. A police car cruised by, slowed briefly, then continued on its way without stopping. Sarah's pleas died in her throat as she realized no help was coming. "Next time your kid spills something," Vince whispered as he passed her, "maybe you'll think twice about where you bring him." The gang mounted their bikes, engines roaring to life in a coordinated symphony of power. Sarah stood frozen until the last motorcycle disappeared around the corner, their laughter echoing off the buildings like mocking ghosts. "Mom?" Ethan's small voice broke through her daze. He stood in the diner doorway, clutching his backpack and the broken pieces of Captain Storm. "It's okay, baby." She wiped her eyes, not realizing until then that she'd been crying. "We'll be okay." The drive home was a nightmare. The car lurched and shuddered on its ruined tires, the cracked windshield making it hard to see. Every bump sent shards of safety glass cascading onto the dashboard. Ethan sat silently in the back seat, his face pale in the rearview mirror. They made it home just as full darkness settled over Pine Grove. Sarah sent Ethan to get ready for bed while she sat at her desk, staring at her laptop's glowing screen. The cursor blinked in an empty email draft addressed to Ryan's secure military account. "Dear Ryan," she typed, then deleted the words. Started again. "I need your help." Delete. "Remember how you always said you'd protect me?" Delete. How could she explain everything in an email? The years of struggle since Mark's death, the way the town had changed, the fear she saw in Ethan's eyes tonight, the helplessness she felt watching those men destroy one of her last connections to her husband. The cursor continued its steady rhythm, marking time like a metronome. From down the hall, she heard Ethan's muffled sobs. He was trying to be quiet, trying to be brave, just like she'd taught him. Sarah closed the laptop. Emails were too easy to ignore, too easy to delete without reading. She picked up her phone instead, scrolling through her contacts until she found the number she rarely used. Ryan's secure voice message line, meant for family emergencies. Was this an emergency? The Steel Reapers hadn't physically hurt them. But as Sarah recalled Vince's threatening smile, the casual way he'd crushed Ethan's toy, she knew this was only the beginning. Her finger hovered over the call button. What right did she have to drag Ryan back into their lives? He'd made his choice years ago, choosing the SEALs over family. He probably had more important things to deal with than a small-town biker gang. But then she thought of Ethan, of how he idolized the uncle he'd never met, of how he played with those action figures, making up stories about Uncle Ryan saving the day. Maybe it was time for reality to match the fantasy, just this once. Sarah pressed a button. The phone rang 3 times before connecting to the voicemail system. "Ryan?" Her voice cracked, and she had to start again. "Ryan, it's Sarah. I know it's been a while. I wouldn't call if it wasn't important." She paused, gathering her courage. "Something's happened. There's this gang in town, the Steel Reapers. They hurt us tonight. Not physically, but God, Ryan, I'm scared." "Ethan's scared. We need—" A sob escaped before she could stop it. "We need you. Please. Just call me back when you get this. Please." She ended the call, her hand shaking as she set down the phone. In the silence that followed, she could hear the wind outside, whistling through the gaps in their old house's windows. Somewhere in the distance, a motorcycle engine revved. Sarah walked to Ethan's room, pausing in the doorway. Her son lay curled in his bed, surrounded by his remaining action figures, his own personal army standing guard. In his sleep, his face was peaceful, showing no sign of the terror he'd experienced. "I'll fix this," she whispered, more to herself than to him. Somehow, she didn't know if Ryan would answer her call, didn't know if he could help even if he did. But as she watched her son sleep, Sarah made a silent promise. She would protect him, with or without her brother's help. She had to. She was all Ethan had left, unless Ryan finally came home. Sarah closed Ethan's door softly and walked to her own room. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. Finding a way to fix the car, explaining to Ethan why they couldn't go back to the diner, facing the whispers and pitying looks from people who had watched and done nothing. But tonight, she allowed herself to hope. Hope that somewhere, on some distant battlefield or secret mission, her big brother would hear her message. Hope that the boy who had once promised to always protect his little sister still existed inside the hardened warrior he'd become. Hope that it wasn't too late for their family to heal. As she drifted off to sleep, Sarah could have sworn she heard another motorcycle engine, closer this time. But she was too exhausted to feel afraid. Let them come, she thought defiantly. They could destroy her car, threaten her job, even scare her son. But they couldn't break her spirit. Not as long as there was still a chance that Ryan would come home. The night deepened, and Pine Grove slept. And somewhere in the darkness, a voicemail waited to be heard, carrying a sister's desperate plea across the miles that separated her from the only person who might be able to save them all. The fluorescent lights of the roadside motel buzzed incessantly as Ryan Blake sat on the edge of his bed, staring at the phone in his hand. 3:47 a.m. His body still operated on mission time, making sleep elusive. The cheap room smelled of stale cigarettes and pine-scented cleaner, a far cry from the desert heat he'd left behind just days ago. Sarah's voicemail played again, her voice small and frightened through the phone's speaker. "Ryan, it's Sarah. I know it's been a while." He hadn't listened to her messages in years. Too busy, too focused on the mission, too haunted by his own demons to face what he'd left behind. But something in her voice tonight had cut through his carefully constructed walls. "We need you. Please." Ryan's scarred hands clenched involuntarily. 5 years since he'd seen her. 5 years since Mark's funeral, where he'd stood awkward and silent in his dress uniform, unable to find words to comfort his grieving sister. 5 years of Christmas cards and birthday messages left unanswered while he buried himself in increasingly dangerous missions. The desert flashback hit without warning, as it always did. The taste of sand in his mouth, the weight of his tactical gear, the screams of his men. They were supposed to be extracting a high-value target from a compound in northern Syria. Simple in-and-out operation. Ryan's team had done dozens like it. But something had gone wrong. The intel was bad. The compound was a trap. "Contact front." Sergeant Martinez's voice crackled through the radio. "Heavy weapons." The explosion threw Ryan backward, the world dissolving into fire and shrapnel. When his vision cleared, half his team lay broken in the sand. Martinez, Chun, Roberts, good men who'd trusted him to lead them home. "Man down! Man down!" The calls echoed through his headset as he crawled toward Martinez, trying to stem the bleeding from his friend's shattered chest. "Not your fault, sir," Martinez whispered through blood-stained lips. "Not your—" Ryan blinked hard, forcing himself back to the present. The motel room materialized around him, mundane and solid. His hands shook as he reached for the bottle of water on the nightstand. The doctors called it PTSD. He called it penance. But Sarah's message played on, dragging him back to a different kind of guilt. "There's this gang in town, the Steel Reapers. They hurt us tonight." The familiar cold anger settled in his chest. He'd spent years hunting terrorists and warlords across the globe while his own sister faced threats in their hometown. While his nephew, Christ, Ethan must be 8 now, grew up without his protection. Ryan was moving before he made the conscious decision. His go bag was already packed. It was always packed. The keys to his black Dodge Charger felt heavy in his palm as he checked out of the motel. The night clerk barely glanced up from her magazine as he passed. The highway stretched empty before him as he headed north toward Pine Grove. For hours of driving lay ahead, giving his mind too much time to wander. Memory Lane was a dangerous road, but tonight he let himself travel it. Sarah at 7, gangly and fearless, following him everywhere despite their mother's protests. Sarah at 16, sneaking out to meet him when he came home on leave, proud to show off her swimming medals. Sarah at 25, radiant in her wedding dress as Mark beamed beside her. Sarah at 30, hollow-eyed at her husband's funeral, clutching a toddler Ethan while Ryan stood uselessly by. "Some brother I turned out to be," he muttered to the empty car. The miles rolled past as Ryan's tactical mind began processing Sarah's situation. Local gang, possible police corruption, escalating intimidation. He'd seen similar patterns in failed states and war zones. The methods might be different, but the psychology was the same. Establish dominance through fear. Target the vulnerable. Make examples of those who resist. Not this time. Not his family. Dawn was breaking over Pine Grove when Ryan turned onto Sarah Street. The neighborhood looked exactly as he remembered it. Modest homes with small yards, basketball hoops and driveways, American flags hanging from porches. Then he saw Sarah's car. Jesus Christ. He pulled up behind the vandalized Honda, taking in the slashed tires, the shattered glass, the crude graffiti. Even in the weak morning light, he could read the threatening messages sprayed across the blue paint. His jaw clenched as he imagined Ethan seeing this, understanding what it meant. The front door opened before he reached it. Sarah stood frozen in the doorway, still in her waitress uniform from the night before. Dark circles shadowed her eyes, and she looked smaller than he remembered, more fragile. Ryan? Her voice cracked on his name. Hey, sis. The words felt inadequate after 5 years of silence. She flew into his arms, and suddenly he was holding his little sister while she sobbed into his chest. Her shoulders shook with the force of emotions too long contained. Ryan's arms tightened around her, muscle memory from childhood taking over. I'm sorry, she hiccuped, pulling back to wipe her eyes. I shouldn't have called. It's not your problem. It became my problem the second they threatened my family. Ryan's voice was quiet, but carried the weight of absolute certainty. A small gasp from inside the house drew their attention. Ethan stood in the hallway, pajama-clad and wide-eyed, clutching a battered action figure. Uncle Ryan? The boy's voice held equal parts awe and uncertainty. Ryan knelt to meet his nephew's eyes, noting how much he looked like Mark. Hey, buddy. Sorry I'm late. Ethan approached cautiously, studying Ryan's face, as if comparing it to the photos he'd seen. Are you really a Navy SEAL? Like Captain Storm? Ryan glanced at the broken action figure in Ethan's hand, understanding dawning. He reached into his jacket pocket and withdrew a small metal pin. His first SEAL trident, earned what felt like a lifetime ago. Here. He pressed the pin into Ethan's small palm. This is worth 100 Captain Storms. It means I made a promise to protect people. And I'm making that promise to you now, okay? Ethan's fingers closed reverently around the pin. Did you fight bad guys? Ethan, Sarah interrupted sharply. Let your uncle come inside. It's not safe to talk out here. The interior of Sarah's house told its own story of struggle. Worn furniture, patched walls, careful attempts to create warmth on a tight budget. Ryan's trained, I noted the strategic placement of lamps to minimize electricity usage, the careful portioning of food in the kitchen, the stack of overdue bills partially hidden beneath a newspaper. Tell me everything, he said once Ethan had been sent to get dressed for school. Sarah sank into a kitchen chair, exhaustion evident in every line of her body. It started small, just another motorcycle gang passing through town. But then they started claiming territory. The diner, the gas station, even the park where kids play. People learned to avoid them, to look the other way. And the police? A bitter laugh. Might as well be on their payroll. Nobody touches the Steel Reapers. Nobody stands up to them. Until last night, I thought if we just kept our heads down. Ryan listened as she described the incident at the diner, his expression hardening at each new detail. The image of his nephew terrified, his sister threatened, burned itself into his memory alongside other atrocities he'd witnessed. I'll handle it, he said when she finished. No. Sarah grabbed his arm. Ryan, these men are dangerous. They have connections. If you go after them. I said I'll handle it. He covered her hand with his own. Low-key. Professional. No one needs to know I'm even here. Promise me. Her eyes searched his face. Promise me you won't make things worse. I promise. The lie came easily. Some situations couldn't get better without getting worse first. After Sarah left for work and Ethan for school, Ryan began his reconnaissance. His first stop was the local library, where he accessed public records and recent newspapers. The Steel Reapers had left a clear trail of intimidation and violence, though few official complaints had been filed. His phone buzzed. A text from an old contact in military intelligence. Data dump incoming. Steel Reapers equals front for larger operation. Multiple state ties. Possible drug corridor. Ryan's laptop filled with encrypted files. Police reports, surveillance photos, financial records. The gang was more organized than they appeared, with tentacles reaching into local government and law enforcement. A name caught his eye in a redacted report. Kane Crusher Malone, listed as the Steel Reapers president. Something tickled Ryan's memory. He'd seen that name before, in a very different context. More keystrokes brought up a classified file from 3 years ago. A joint CIA SEAL operation targeting a weapons smuggling ring in Eastern Europe. The mission had gone sideways when their target got tipped off. Ryan's team had found only empty warehouses and cold leads. But there, in the surveillance photos, stood a younger Kane Malone meeting with known arms dealers. The intelligence community suspected he had military or intelligence training, but could never prove it. Small world, Ryan muttered, pieces clicking into place. His phone buzzed again. A text from Sarah. Ethan told his whole class about you today. Said his Navy SEAL uncle came to save us. Please be careful. Ryan closed his eyes, imagining how quickly that information would spread through a small town. How soon it would reach the wrong ears. Don't worry, he texted back. Just catching up with family. But his mind was already shifting into operational mode, analyzing angles and contingencies. Kane Malone was no ordinary biker thug. He was trained, connected, and now he knew a Navy SEAL had entered his territory. The game had changed, and Ryan Blake was done playing defense. His phone lit up with another message from his intelligence contact. Found something. Local police chief making regular deposits way above pay grade. Trail leads to offshore account linked to Malone. Ryan's jaw tightened as he studied the financial records. The corruption went deeper than anyone suspected. The Steel Reapers weren't just terrorizing a small town. They were using it as a base for something bigger. Something that would make threatening a single mom and her son seem like a minor transgression. The sun was setting over Pine Grove as Ryan drove past the diner where it had all started. Motorcycles lined the parking lot, their chrome gleaming in the dying light. Through the windows, he could see leather-clad figures laughing and drinking, believing themselves untouchable. They had no idea what was coming. Ryan parked a block away, observing the gang members through his tactical binoculars. He recognized Vince from Sarah's description, the enforcer who'd terrorized his nephew. The man's swaggering confidence spoke of someone used to wielding power without consequence. But it was another figure that drew Ryan's attention. Kane Malone sat in a corner booth, his presence commanding even from a distance. He carried himself like a soldier, not a biker. His eyes constantly scanned his surroundings, checking sight lines and exits. Their gazes met briefly through the window. Recognition flickered in Malone's eyes, not of Ryan specifically, but of what he represented. Game recognizes game, as the saying went. Ryan's phone vibrated one final time. A message from Sarah. Please don't do anything stupid. We need you alive more than we need revenge. He typed back a reassuring response, even as he began formulating plans. Sarah was wrong about one thing. This wasn't about revenge. It was about protection, about finally being the brother and uncle he should have been all along. The Steel Reapers had brought war to his family's doorstep. Now, they would learn what real warriors could do. As darkness fell over Pine Grove, Ryan Blake drove back to Sarah's house, his mind clear for the first time in years. He had a mission again, a purpose, and this time, he wouldn't fail the people counting on him. The war for Pine Grove was about to begin. The pre-dawn chill settled around Ryan as he crouched in the shadows across from the Steel Reapers clubhouse. He'd been there for 3 hours, his body perfectly still, watching the comings and goings through his tactical binoculars. Military training had taught him that the hours between 3 a.m. and sunrise often revealed the most about an operation's true nature. A motorcycle rumbled up to the worn-down building that had once been a local bar. Ryan recognized Vince immediately. The enforcer's swagger was unmistakable even at this distance. 2 other bikes followed, their riders carrying duffel bags that seemed too heavy for casual luggage. Right on schedule, Ryan muttered, noting the time. 4th night in a row he'd observed this particular delivery pattern. Movement at the clubhouse door caught his attention. Kane Crusher Malone emerged, his massive frame filling the doorway. Unlike his subordinates, Kane carried himself with military precision, shoulders squared, eyes constantly scanning, weight balanced for quick reaction. No wonder he'd survived that operation in Eastern Europe. Ryan's earpiece crackled softly. Target is mobile, a familiar voice reported. Black SUV, heading your way from the south. Copy that. Ryan had called in a few favors, enlisting former SEAL teammates to help with surveillance. They'd understood without him having to explain. You don't leave a brother hanging when family's involved. The SUV arrived right on cue, its tinted windows obscuring the occupants. But Ryan didn't need to see inside to know this was more than a social call. The duffel bags disappeared into the vehicle's trunk, replaced by an envelope that came tucked into his leather vest. "Got you," Ryan whispered, snapping high-resolution photos with a specialized camera. The sunrise would have to wait. He had other plans for the morning. 2 hours later, Ryan stood in Sarah's backyard with Ethan, who was bouncing with excitement at spending time with his uncle. "Are you going to teach me how to fight bad guys?" Ethan asked, throwing mock punches at the air. "Better than that." Ryan knelt to his nephew's level. "I'm going to teach you how to avoid fighting altogether. But first, want to play a game?" Ethan nodded eagerly. "It's called Spot and Escape. The rules are simple. You have to spot anything unusual in your surroundings and know your fastest way out. Let's practice." For the next hour, Ryan guided Ethan through what looked like innocent playground games, but were actually basic self-defense and situational awareness drills. How to break free from a grab, how to create distance from a threat, how to call for help effectively. Remember, Ryan emphasized as they took a water break, the best fighters are the ones who never have to throw a punch. Being aware of your surroundings is your first line of defense. Like how you always sit facing the door at restaurants? Ethan asked innocently. Ryan smiled, impressed by his nephew's observation. "Exactly like that, Ryan." Sarah's voice carried from the back door. "Can we talk?" The kitchen was warm with the smell of coffee, but Sarah's expression was cool as Ryan entered. She waited until Ethan was out of earshot before speaking. "Mrs. Peterson next door told me some interesting stories this morning," she began, gripping her coffee mug tightly. "About how the Steel Reapers have been running protection rackets all over town. How they drove the Henderson family out of business when they couldn't pay. How they've got half the police force in their pocket." "Sarah, no, let me finish." Her voice shook slightly. "She also told me about the mysterious figure watching the clubhouse at night. About the black charger that keeps showing up around town." "What are you doing, Ryan?" "Gathering intelligence. Building a case. Nothing that'll put you or Ethan at risk. Nothing that'll." Sarah set her mug down hard enough to slosh coffee onto the counter. "You're stalking a violent gang that has the police on their payroll. What do you think they'll do if they catch you?" "What they'll do to us?" "They won't catch me. That's not the point." Sarah's controlled whisper was worse than a shout. "We needed your help, yes, but not like this. Not more violence. Not more secrets. We needed our brother and uncle, not whatever this is." The words hit harder than any physical blow. Ryan leaned against the counter, suddenly tired. "What do you want from me, Sarah? You call after 5 years, telling me your son, my nephew, is being terrorized and expect me to what? File a complaint? Write my congressman? I expected you to be here, to help us feel safe, to be part of this family again." Sarah's eyes filled with tears. "Where were you when Mark died? When I was trying to explain to Ethan why his daddy wasn't coming home? When I had to sell our house and take 2 jobs just to keep us afloat?" The guilt Ryan had carried for years crystallized in a sharp-edged pain. "I couldn't. After what happened on that mission, losing those men, I wasn't in a good place. I thought I'd just make things worse. Worse than leaving us alone? Than letting Ethan build up this fantasy hero worship of an uncle who couldn't even show up for his birthday." Ryan closed his eyes, memories washing over him. Sarah's unanswered calls. Ethan's letters returned unopened. Christmas cards stuffed into a drawer in whatever temporary housing he'd been calling home. "You're right," he said finally. "I failed you both. But I'm here now, and I can't just stand by while these thugs threaten my family." Sarah's expression softened slightly. "Just promise me you'll be careful. Ethan can't lose another father figure." The word choice wasn't lost on Ryan. He pulled his sister into a tight hug, feeling her resistance melt away. "I promise. But I have to finish what I've started." That evening found Ryan at the Pine Grove Diner, seated at the counter with a clear view of the Steel Reaper's usual table. He'd timed his arrival carefully, knowing from his surveillance that Vince typically showed up around 6 for his evening meal. The bell above the door chimed right on schedule. Conversations quieted as Vince swaggered in, followed by 2 other gang members. Ryan continued eating his burger, not looking up as the enforcer passed behind him. "Hey, ain't you Sarah's brother?" One of the bikers had noticed him. "The Navy SEAL?" Now Ryan turned, meeting Vince's gaze with calm assessment. "That's right." Vince's hand twitched toward his jacket, where he likely carried his knife, Ryan noted, before stopping himself. "Long way from the ocean?" Ain't you? Just passing through. Family business. Ryan wiped his mouth deliberately with a napkin. Heard you met my nephew the other day. Made quite an impression. The threat in his voice was subtle, but unmistakable. Vince's face darkened with anger, but uncertainty flickered in his eyes. He was used to being the scariest person in the room. Yeah, well, Vince tried to recover his bravado. Kids need to learn respect. Watch where they're going. Funny. Ryan stood slowly, his movement causing Vince to take an involuntary step back. I was about to say the same thing. The tension in the diner could have been cut with a knife. Other customers quickly paid their bills and left, leaving only Ryan, the bikers, and the terrified staff. You threatening me? Vince's hand did go to his jacket this time. Ryan smiled, the cold, empty smile he'd perfected in war zones. Just making conversation. Have a nice evening. He paid his bill and walked out, counting steps in his head. 3, 2, 1. Boss wants to see you. A new voice from the shadows beside his car. 3 more Steel Reapers had materialized, trying to box him in. Send him my regards. Ryan's stance shifted imperceptibly, ready for anything. I'm a bit busy tonight. Wasn't a request. The speaker reached for something in his vest. Ryan moved with explosive speed, his elbow connecting with the first biker's solar plexus while his other hand trapped the reaching arm. A quick twist produced a satisfying crack of bone. The others backed away, suddenly less certain about their odds. Tell Kane that if he wants to talk, he can find me, Ryan said calmly, releasing his groaning victim. But come at me or my family again, and this conversation gets a lot less friendly. He drove away, watching in his rearview mirror, as Vince burst out of the diner too late to join the confrontation. Phase 1 complete. Let them know they weren't dealing with ordinary civilians anymore. His phone buzzed with a text from his surveillance team. Package intercepted. You're going to want to see this. The meeting point was an abandoned gas station on the edge of town. Ryan's former teammate, Mike Torres, waited in the shadows with a duffel bag, one of the ones they'd watched being delivered earlier. Early Christmas present, Torres said, unzipping the bag to reveal neat stacks of cash and several bags of white powder. But that's not the interesting part. He handed Ryan a leather-bound ledger. Found this with the money. Somebody likes to keep old-school records. Ryan flipped through the pages, his expression hardening. The ledger detailed months of payments, protection money from local businesses, bribes to specific police officers, kickbacks from drug sales. But the biggest entries were regular payments to a familiar name. Police Chief Gerald Warren. Son of a bitch, Ryan muttered, photographing key pages. The amounts matched the suspicious deposits his intelligence contact had found. Gets better. Torres pointed to a series of entries coded with letters and numbers. That's military formatting. Kane's not just running drugs. He's using old Spec Ops connections to move weapons through town. Pine Grove's strategic location makes it perfect for a distribution hub. Ryan's mind raced with implications. This was bigger than local gang violence. The Steel Reapers were part of a sophisticated criminal network, with law enforcement actively helping to cover their tracks. His phone buzzed again, a text from Sarah. Where are you? Ethan's asking for his uncle. Ryan stared at the message, then at the ledger in his hands. He had the evidence he needed to expose the corruption, but using it would escalate the situation beyond any hope of keeping things low-key as he'd promised Sarah. What's the play, boss? Torres asked, reading his expression. Ryan tucked the ledger into his jacket. Get this evidence somewhere safe. I need to think about our next move. But as he drove home through the quiet streets of Pine Grove, Ryan knew the time for thinking was running out. Kane wouldn't take tonight's confrontation lightly. The gang would retaliate. It was just a question of when and how hard. The war for Pine Grove was about to enter its next phase, whether Ryan was ready or not. And this time, the collateral damage could be the very family he'd returned to protect. In his rearview mirror, a motorcycle's headlight appeared, then another. The Steel Reapers were done watching and waiting. Game on. Sarah knew something was wrong the moment she pulled into the Carter Insurance parking lot. The early morning silence was too complete, the normally bustling office too dark. As she approached the building, glass crunched beneath her shoes. Oh God, she whispered, fumbling for her phone's flashlight. The beam revealed devastation. Every window had been smashed, the glass glittering like deadly diamonds on the sidewalk. But it was the walls that made her blood run cold. Crude graffiti covered the brick in garish red paint. Seal family equals dead family. Sarah. Lisa Zhang's voice quavered behind her. What would happen? More employees were arriving, clustering in shocked groups as they discovered their workplace transformed into a war zone. Inside was even worse. Desks overturned, computers smashed, years of paperwork scattered like confetti. The break room microwave had been thrown through the plate glass window of Mr. Carter's office. Sarah's desk had received special attention. Her family photo, the one showing her, Mark, and baby Ethan, had been stabbed to the desktop with a hunting knife. A motorcycle gang patch hung from the blade. Her hands shook as she called Ryan. I'll be right there, her brother said, his voice tight with controlled fury. Police arrived before Ryan, taking photographs and collecting statements with suspicious lack of urgency. Sarah noticed how they avoided looking directly at the threatening messages, how their questions focused on insurance coverage rather than investigating the crime. Maybe we should leave town, she told Ryan when he arrived, his presence causing the officers to suddenly remember other duties. Just for a while, until things calm down. They'll never calm down if we run. Ryan's eyes hadn't stopped scanning their surroundings since he arrived. These types of gangs thrive on fear. If we leave, they win, and they'll keep winning, keep hurting other families. I don't care about other families. Sarah's voice cracked. I care about my son, about keeping him safe. Trust me, Ryan gripped her shoulders gently. I've dealt with worse than the Steel Reapers. Let me handle this. Like you handled things last night? Sarah pulled away. The whole town's talking about your little showdown at the diner. You promised to keep things low-key. Sometimes you have to send a message. Well, they sent one back. Sarah gestured at the destruction around them. All over my workplace. I can't lose this job, Ryan. We barely make it as it is. Ryan's expression softened. You won't lose anything. I promise. Go home. Pack some essentials for you and Ethan. You'll stay at my motel until I can set up better security at your house. I have to pick up Ethan from school first. I'll follow in my car. Just to be safe. Sarah's hands trembled on the steering wheel as she drove to Pine Grove Elementary. Every motorcycle sound made her flinch. Every black vehicle in her mirrors looked threatening. She almost missed Ryan's Charger, maintaining a discreet distance behind her. The school parking lot was half empty. Many parents had kept their kids home after hearing about the insurance office vandalism. Sarah hurried inside, trying to project calm she didn't feel. Mommy! Ethan burst out of his classroom, backpack bouncing. We learned about dolphins today. Did you know they sleep with half their brain awake? That's fascinating, sweetie. Sarah managed to smile, guiding him toward the exit. We're going to have a little adventure tonight. Stay at Uncle Ryan's motel. Maybe get pizza. Cool. Can we get extra cheese? Can Uncle Ryan teach me more spy games? Sarah's response died in her throat as they reached the parking lot. 3 motorcycles idled near her car. Vince and 2 other Steel Reapers watching them with predatory interest. Get in, quickly, she whispered, fumbling with her keys. The motorcycles roared to life as she pulled out of the parking lot. Sarah's heart pounded as she checked her mirrors. Where was Ryan? The bikers fell into formation behind her, close enough that their headlights filled her car with threatening light. Mom? Ethan's voice was small. Why are they following us? It's okay, baby. Just a game of follow the leader. Sarah tried to keep her voice steady as she turned onto Madison Street. The bikers matched her turn, drawing closer. A horn blared as one of the motorcycles swerved into the oncoming lane, forcing a minivan onto the shoulder. The biker pulled alongside Sarah's car, grinning through his helmet visor as he edged closer, trying to force her off the road. Sarah's hands were slick with sweat on the wheel. She couldn't speed up. The Honda was still damaged from the previous attack. Couldn't slow down. They'd box her in. Where was Ryan? The answer came with squealing tires as the black Charger burst from a side street, cutting between Sarah's car and the threatening motorcycle. The biker swerved hard to avoid collision, losing control and sliding across the pavement in a shower of sparks. Hold on! Sarah yelled as she accelerated through the gap Ryan had created. In her rearview mirror, she saw her brother's car execute a precise spin, now facing the remaining bikers who had stopped to help their fallen companion. She didn't slow down until they reached the motel, her legs shaking so badly she could barely walk. Ryan arrived minutes later, his expression grim. They won't be following anyone for a while, he said simply. Their bikes need some repairs. Sarah's phone rang before she could respond. Unknown number. Mrs. Mitchell? The voice was cultured, educated. Not what she expected from a biker gang leader. This is Kane Malone. I believe we should discuss your brother's recent activities. Sarah's blood ran cold. Ryan reached for the phone, but she waved him off, putting it on speaker. I have nothing to discuss with you, she said firmly. On the contrary. Malone's tone remained pleasant. We have mutual interests. The safety of your son, for instance. Your continued employment. Your brother's extensive military background. The threat was clear beneath the polite words. Your brother's quite impressive, Malone continued. Distinguished service record. Multiple commendations. That mission in Syria was particularly interesting, though I imagine he doesn't like to discuss how it ended. Ryan's face went rigid. Sarah watched him struggle to control his reaction, understanding now why he never talked about his time overseas. What do you want? She demanded. Simple. Tell your brother to back off. Take your son and leave town, or I'll be forced to demonstrate exactly how much we've learned about your family's vulnerabilities. The line went dead. Ryan was already moving, pulling equipment from his car. Small cameras, motion sensors, sophisticated security gear Sarah had only seen in movies. We're not staying at the motel, he said, checking weapons she hadn't realized he carried. Too exposed. I've got a safe house ready. But first we need to secure your place. They'll expect us to run, try to catch us packing. The next hour was a blur of tactical preparations. Ryan worked methodically, turning Sarah's modest home into a surveillance hub. Cameras covered every approach. Sensors monitored windows and doors. An alert system connected directly to his phone. How did they know about Syria? Sarah asked as they worked. About your mission? Kane's ex-military. Probably still has intelligence connections. Ryan's jaw tightened. He's trying to get in my head. Show he's done his homework. Is it working? Ryan didn't answer, focused on adjusting a camera angle. That night, Sarah woke to Ethan's screams. She found him tangled in sweat-soaked sheets, crying out in his sleep. The bad men are coming, he sobbed as she gathered him close. They're going to hurt you because of me. Because I spilled the drink. No, baby, no. Sarah rocked him gently. None of this is your fault. You hear me? The bad men are just bad. But Uncle Ryan won't let them hurt us. Promise? Sarah met Ryan's eyes in the doorway. Promise. Later, after Ethan had finally drifted back to sleep, she found Ryan studying blueprints on his laptop. What are you looking at? Old warehouse district records. The Steel Reaper's drug shipments are too regular, too well organized. They must have a distribution center nearby. He pointed to a seemingly abandoned building. This place uses 10 times the electricity of the surrounding properties. Ryan. Sarah sank into a chair. What are we going to do? Before he could answer, alarms blared from his phone. Security cameras showed dark figures approaching the house from multiple directions. Motorcycles blocked both ends of the street. Get Ethan, Ryan ordered, reaching for his gear. Get to the basement. Now. Sarah ran to her son's room as engines roared outside. Through the windows, she saw motorcycle headlights converging on their house like angry fireflies. The front door shuddered under heavy impacts. Glass broke somewhere in the back of the house. Sarah half-carried a confused Ethan toward the basement stairs, her mind racing. The basement had a concealed exit. Ryan had shown her earlier, made her memorize the route. But Ryan wasn't here. He'd left an hour ago to scout the warehouse, trusting his security system to protect them. She was alone with her terrified son as boots thundered through her home. Think she ordered herself? What would Ryan do? The basement was dark and cold. Sarah guided Ethan behind old boxes, pressing the panic button Ryan had given her. Help would come, but would it come in time? Footsteps creaked on the floor above. Voices called to each other, searching. A door splintered. Remember the games Uncle Ryan taught you? Sarah whispered to Ethan. About being quiet and finding escape routes? Ethan nodded, his eyes huge in the darkness. Good? Because we're going to. The basement door burst open, flashlight beams stabbing through the darkness. Sarah's hand closed around a hammer from Ryan's toolbox. Here, kitty kitty, Vince's voice echoed down the stairs. No big bad seal to protect you now. Sarah's grip tightened on the hammer. She might not be a Navy SEAL, but she was a mother protecting her child. Sometimes that was even more dangerous. The first biker never saw the hammer coming as he reached the bottom step. The second tripped over his fallen friend, crashing into a stack of boxes. Sarah grabbed Ethan's hand and ran for the concealed exit Ryan had prepared, her heart pounding in her ears. They emerged 2 houses down, in old Mrs. Henderson's garden. Sarah could hear shouts of confusion from her house. The gang, discovering their quarry, had escaped. Her phone vibrated. "Ryan, are you safe?" His voice was tight with controlled fury. "Yes, we're out. Use the basement exit. Good girl. Get to the rendezvous point. I'm 5 minutes out." Sarah hustled Ethan through backyards and side streets, blessing Ryan's insistence on practicing this route earlier. Behind them, motorcycle engines roared in frustration as the Steel Reapers realized their prey had slipped away. They reached the predetermined meeting spot, an abandoned church, just as Ryan's Charger appeared. Sarah had never been so glad to see her brother. "This ends tonight," Ryan said as they climbed into his car. His voice was deadly calm, the voice of a man who had finally found his true mission. "I've got proof of their operation, proof of the police chief's involvement. But more importantly, they just try to hurt my family." "What are you going to do?" Sarah asked, holding Ethan close in the back seat. Ryan's eyes met hers in the rearview mirror. "Exactly what you asked me here to do. Protect my family. Protect this town." The Steel Reapers wanted a war. Now they're going to learn what that really means. The car accelerated into the night, carrying them toward an uncertain future. But Sarah felt safer than she had in months. Her big brother was finally home, finally fully present. And God help anyone who threatened his family now. The war for Pine Grove was about to reach its climax. And this time, the Steel Reapers would learn the difference between playing at being warriors and facing a real one. Behind them, sirens wailed in the distance. But Sarah knew the police wouldn't help. They were part of the problem. The real justice would come from the quiet man behind the wheel, the brother who had finally found his way home, the uncle who had become the hero her son always believed him to be. The night wasn't over. But for the first time, Sarah believed they might actually win. The warehouse district was a maze of abandoned buildings and broken dreams on the outskirts of Pine Grove. Ryan moved like a shadow through the darkness, his years of SEAL training evident in every silent step. The target building loomed ahead, a seemingly derelict structure that consumed enough electricity to power a small factory. His thermal imaging equipment revealed 4 guards, 2 at ground level, 2 on the catwalks above. Amateur deployment. They'd left blind spots big enough to drive a truck through. Ryan smiled grimly as he identified his entry point, a partially boarded second-story window on the building's north side. The climb was easy. The old brick facade might as well have been a ladder to someone with his training. Inside, Ryan found his perch in the steel rafters, settling in to observe the operation below. The warehouse floor bustled with activity despite the late hour. Crates of weapons were being unpacked and inventoried under harsh fluorescent lights. In one corner, a group of men counted stacks of cash while others weighed and packaged white powder into precise portions. The scale of the operation was larger than Ryan had anticipated. "Careful with those," a familiar voice barked. Kane Malone emerged from an office, supervising the unloading of what appeared to be military-grade hardware. "Those rifles are worth more than your lives." Ryan's jaw tightened as he recognized the weapons, the same model his team had used in Syria. The pieces were falling into place. Kane wasn't just running drugs. He was using the Steel Reapers as cover for an international arms trafficking operation. Moving with practiced stealth, Ryan began planting his surveillance equipment. Tiny cameras in overlooked corners, GPS trackers magnetized to vehicle frames, electronic bugs in strategic locations. Each placement was calculated to build a complete picture of the gang's operations. He was attaching the last tracker when voices approached his position. "The SEAL's becoming a problem," Kane was saying. "He's not backing down like the others. So let's handle him like we handled that nosy reporter last year," another voice suggested. "Blake's different. He's trained, connected. We need to be smart about this." Ryan recorded the conversation, adding it to his growing collection of evidence. By the time he slipped out of the warehouse 3 hours later, he had enough intelligence to bring down a dozen criminal enterprises. Dawn found him back at the safe house, where Sarah and Ethan had spent the night. His sister was already awake, nursing a cup of coffee at the kitchen table. "Ready for your first lesson?" Ryan asked, moving furniture to create an open space. Sarah eyed him skeptically. "I thought you said no more violence." "This isn't about violence. It's about confidence, awareness, being prepared." Ryan demonstrated a basic stance. "If someone grabs you from behind, what's your first move?" For the next hour, he guided Sarah through fundamental self-defense techniques. How to break holds, where to strike for maximum effect, how to use an attacker's momentum against them. "You're stronger than you think," Ryan encouraged as Sarah successfully executed a wrist break. "The key is commitment. Don't hesitate." "Like you." Sarah's voice held an edge. "Is that what you were doing all night?" "Not hesitating." Ryan paused, studying his sister's face. "You're angry." "Of course I'm angry." Sarah's control finally broke. "You disappear for hours, come back smelling like gunpowder and danger, teaching me how to fight like this is normal, like we're soldiers in your private war." "This became a war the moment they threatened you and Ethan." "And what about Ethan? What example are we setting? He already lost his father. I can't let him lose his uncle too." Ryan's response was interrupted by his phone buzzing. A message from one of his surveillance cameras. Movement at the warehouse. One of Kane's top lieutenants, Danny the Ghost Martinez, was heading out alone. "We'll finish this later," Ryan said, already moving toward the door. "That's exactly what I'm talking about," Sarah called after him, running off to fight instead of facing real conversations. But Ryan was already gone, his mind shifting into operational mode. He'd been waiting for an opportunity to isolate one of Kane's inner circle. The Ghost was about to learn why they called SEALs the silent professionals. The ambush was precisely executed. One moment, Martinez was walking to his motorcycle. The next, he was zip-tied to a chair in an abandoned storage unit, facing a very calm, very determined Ryan Blake. "Hello, Ghost." Ryan's voice was conversational. "Let's talk about next Thursday's shipment." "I don't know what you're talking about." Martinez tried to sound tough, but his eyes darted nervously. "Sure you do." Ryan pulled out his phone, playing a recording from the warehouse. Martinez's own voice discussing delivery schedules. "But that's not really what I want to discuss. You see, my sister." "Look, man, I never touched your sister. That was all Vince's idea." "I know." Ryan leaned closer. "But you knew about it. You helped plan it. And now you're going to help me make things right." 30 minutes later, Martinez stumbled out of the storage unit, shaken but physically unharmed. He had a new appreciation for Navy SEALs and detailed instructions about staying away from the Mitchell family. Ryan's phone buzzed again as he watched Martinez speed away. A text from Sarah. "Fire. They're burning the lawn." He broke every speed limit getting back to the house. The front yard was ablaze, flames spelling out a message: leave or burn. Sarah stood at a safe distance, holding a crying Ethan while neighbors gathered to gawk. Ryan calmly retrieved a fire extinguisher from his car and methodically put out the flames. When the last ember died, he reached into his pocket and removed his spare SEAL trident, identical to the one he'd given Ethan. With deliberate movements, he placed the pin in the center of the scorched grass. "Let Kane chew on that message. Is this what victory looks like to you?" Sarah demanded later, after Ethan had finally fallen asleep. "Our lawn is destroyed, my son is traumatized, and you're trading macho symbols with criminals." "They're escalating because we're winning," Ryan tried to explain. "I've got proof of their entire operation. One phone call to the right federal agent and—" "I don't want proof." Sarah's voice rose before she caught herself, glancing toward Ethan's room. "I want my life back. I want my son to feel safe in his own home." Neither of them noticed Ethan standing in the hallway, listening with wide eyes. The boy clutched his uncle's first SEAL pin, remembering how his father used to promise everything would be okay. Adults always promise things would be okay. Ryan spent the next hour on the phone with his federal contact, Agent Diana Chun. "I'm sending you everything now," he said, transmitting files encrypted with military-grade security. GPS coordinates, surveillance footage, financial records. The whole operation. "This is explosive stuff," Blake Chun replied. "International weapons trafficking, drug distribution, corruption at multiple levels of local government. We'll need to coordinate with several agencies." "Thursday." Ryan's voice was firm. "That's when they're moving their biggest shipment yet." Every major player will be there. I'll have tactical teams ready. But Ryan, be careful. If they're tipped off, I know. Just make it happen. Thursday arrived with the promise of justice. Ryan watched from his surveillance position as federal vehicles took up hidden positions around the warehouse. Agent Chun had assembled an impressive force. FBI, DEA, ATF, even some of Ryan's old SEAL teammates. Everything was in place. Everything was perfect. Until it wasn't. The first sign of trouble was when the warehouse suddenly went dark. Then police sirens began wailing in the distance, but they were heading away from the target. All units, be advised. Chen's voice crackled through Ryan's earpiece. Warehouse is empty. Repeat, warehouse is empty. They knew we were coming. Ryan's blood ran cold as he accessed his surveillance feeds. The warehouse had been cleared out hours ago. Someone had warned them. Chun, he barked into his radio. Check your team. Someone leaked. Already on it. Chen's voice was grim. 3 local officers were assigned to the perimeter. All 3 just disappeared. Ryan switched channels, watching in helpless fury as his carefully laid plan unraveled. The corruption ran deeper than anyone had suspected. The Steel Reapers didn't just have a few cops on the payroll. They had systematically infiltrated local law enforcement. His phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Nice try, SEAL. Ready to play for real now? Ryan's response was interrupted by another message. This one from Sarah. They're here. At the house. Lots of them. The war for Pine Grove had just entered its final phase. And Ryan Blake had finally learned the true cost of underestimating his enemy. The night wasn't over, but the rules had just changed dramatically. Dawn crept over Pine Grove as Ryan spread the evidence across Sarah's kitchen table. Surveillance photos, financial records, transcripts of recorded conversations. His sister stared at the documents, her coffee growing cold and forgotten. These deposits, Ryan pointed to a bank statement, show regular payments from offshore accounts linked to the Steel Reapers. Chief Warren's been getting payoffs for months. But it goes deeper than that. He laid out more photos. Police Chief Gerald Warren meeting with Kane Malone in secluded locations. Officers turning blind eyes to obvious criminal activity. Patrol cars conspicuously absent from areas where the gang operated. The whole department? Sarah's voice was barely a whisper. Not all of them, but enough. The good cops are either intimidated into silence or transferred out of town. Ryan's jaw tightened. The raid failed because Warren had his people embedded in the operation. They warned Kane before we could move. Sarah pushed away from the table, pacing the small kitchen. Why are you doing this, Ryan? Really? You could have called the FBI, given them the evidence, and gone back to your life. Why stay and fight? Because it's my fault. The words exploded from Ryan before he could stop them. All of it. I should have been here when Mark died. Should have helped you rebuild. Instead, I ran away to fight other people's wars because I couldn't face my own failures. The kitchen fell silent except for the gentle hum of the refrigerator. In the distance, a motorcycle engine revved, a sound that had become synonymous with threat in Pine Grove. After that mission in Syria went bad, Ryan continued, his voice rougher, I couldn't trust myself to protect anyone. Lost half my team because of bad intel, bad decisions. When Mark died, I was in some godforsaken desert, chasing terrorists instead of being there for my family. So I stayed away, telling myself you were better off without me bringing my demons to your door. We needed you, Sarah said softly. Ethan needed his uncle. I needed my brother. I know, and I can't change the past, but I can fight for your future. Ryan gathered the documents into a neat pile. That's why I called Lisa Zhang, the reporter from the Pine Grove Gazette, the one who wrote that expose on city council corruption last year. Ryan nodded. She's been investigating the Steel Reapers for months, but couldn't get concrete proof. Now, she has it. The meeting with Lisa took place in the newspaper's cramped break room, away from prying eyes. The young reporter's eyes widened as she reviewed Ryan's evidence. This is incredible, she breathed, examining surveillance photos. But also incredibly dangerous. The last reporter who looked into the Steel Reapers had his car run off the road. The police called it an accident. That's why we need to be smart about this, Ryan said. Release the information in stages. Build public pressure. Make it too big for them to cover up. Lisa chewed her lip thoughtfully. I have some additional info that might help. Been collecting rumors, witness statements, anything I could verify, including some interesting connections between Chief Warren and certain missing evidence from drug busts. How long to prepare the story? Give me 48 hours to verify and organize everything. But Ryan. Lisa's expression was serious. Once this starts, there's no going back. They'll know where it came from. I'm counting on it. Meanwhile, across town at Pine Grove Elementary, Ethan Mitchell was excitedly telling his best friend Tommy about his uncle during recess. He's a real Navy SEAL, Ethan said proudly, showing off the trident pin. He fought bad guys in the desert, and now he's protecting us from the mean bikers. Tommy's father, Officer Pete Davidson, heard every word that evening when his son innocently repeated the conversation over dinner. Within an hour, the information reached Kane Malone. The next morning, Sarah noticed the motorcycle first. A black Harley parked across from Carter Insurance, its rider watching the building with obvious intent. When she picked up Ethan from school, another bike followed them home, maintaining just enough distance to stay legal. They're everywhere now, Sarah told Ryan that evening. At work, at school, at the grocery store. Just watching. Ryan knew. He'd been watching the watchers, maintaining his own surveillance from concealed positions. The Steel Reapers were escalating their intimidation, trying to break their target's spirits before launching their real attack. Stay away from windows, he instructed, checking the security system for the third time that hour. Vary your routes to work and school. Don't establish patterns they can predict. Lisa's investigation was yielding more fruit. She'd uncovered a network of shell companies used to launder the gang's profits, all linking back to accounts controlled by Chief Warren. He's been their partner from the beginning, Lisa explained during a secure video call. When Kane chose Pine Grove as his base, Warren saw an opportunity. The chief provides protection and intelligence. The gang provides cash and connections. It's a perfect corrupt symbiosis. Ryan had heard enough. Time to confront the spider at the center of this web. The Pine Grove police station squatted like a concrete fortress in the heart of downtown. Ryan walked in through the front door, projecting casual confidence despite the hostile stares from officers who recognized him. Chief Warren's expecting me, he told the desk sergeant. A lie, but delivered with such authority that the sergeant simply nodded and buzzed him through. Gerald Warren was a bear of a man running to fat, his uniform straining against his bulk. He looked up from paperwork as Ryan entered his office, his expression carefully neutral. Mr. Blake, to what do I owe the pleasure? Ryan dropped a thumb drive on the chief's desk. Consider this a preview. Every financial transaction, every meeting with Kane Malone, every time you had your officers sabotage investigations into the Steel Reapers. The Pine Grove Gazette gets the full story in 48 hours. Warren's face remained impassive, but a vein pulsed in his temple. That's a serious accusation. The kind that could get a man hurt in this town. I've survived worse than small-town corruption. Have your family? Warren's voice was soft, dangerous. Your sister? That sweet nephew of yours? Pine Grove's a dangerous place these days. Accidents happen. Ryan leaned forward, his voice dropping to a whisper that nonetheless filled the room. Touch them, and what happens next won't be an accident. You're not dealing with some local troublemaker, Chief. You're dealing with someone who hunted terrorists for a living. Someone who knows exactly how to dismantle an organization like yours. You think you're the first tough guy to come through here? Warren's laugh was ugly. We eat guys like you for breakfast. Check my service record. I'm not like anyone you've dealt with before. Ryan stood. 48 hours, Chief. Clean up your department, or watch it burn. He turned to leave, practiced instincts noting the positions of every officer in the building, every possible exit route. He'd made his play, now to wait for the response. It came sooner than expected. Warren waited exactly 17 minutes after Ryan left before making a call. Kane, we have a problem. Blake just left my office. Yeah, he knows everything. No, he's got proof. Real proof. The Gazette's running the story in 2 days. I know. Look, he'll have to come through the clubhouse to get the final evidence he needs. Yeah, we can work with that. Make it look clean. The chief hung up, a thin smile spreading across his face. Sometimes the best way to deal with a problem was to let it walk right into a trap. Across town, Ryan's phone buzzed with a text from one of his surveillance cameras. A convoy of motorcycles was heading toward the Steel Reapers clubhouse. Among them was a familiar black Harley, Kane Malone himself, riding point. Another message, this one from Lisa, got a tip about documents at the clubhouse. Physical proof of Warren's involvement. Should I check it out? Ryan's reply was immediate. No. It's a trap. They're expecting me. Lisa, what are you going to do? Ryan smiled grimly as he checked his weapons and equipment. Give them exactly what they want. Sometimes the best way to spring a trap was to walk into it with your eyes open. Ryan Blake had learned that lesson in a dozen war zones. Now it was time to teach it to the Steel Reapers. The war for Pine Grove was about to reach its climax. But first, Ryan had a stop to make. He found Sarah at home, helping Ethan with homework. His sister took one look at his expression and sent Ethan to his room. You're going to do something stupid, aren't you? She asked. Something necessary. Ryan hugged her tightly. Whatever happens next, remember, you're stronger than you think. And I'm not running away this time. Sarah watched her brother walk into the gathering darkness, understanding finally why he had to fight this battle. It wasn't just about protecting them or redeeming past failures. It was about standing up to evil in their own backyard, about showing Ethan that sometimes good people had to fight back. But as she watched Ryan's car disappear around the corner, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that she was watching her brother drive into an ambush that even a Navy SEAL might not survive. In his office, Chief Warren made another call, this one to a secure line. Everything's set. Yeah, Blake took the bait. The clubhouse will be his last stop. No traces. Just another tragic example of why people shouldn't mess with the Steel Reapers. The chief hung up and poured himself a drink, toasting his reflection in the window. Soon, their little problem would be permanently solved, and Pine Grove would return to its profitable routine of corruption and fear. But Warren had made one crucial mistake. He'd assumed Ryan Blake was working alone. He wasn't. As Ryan drove toward what everyone assumed would be his doom, gears were already in motion that would change Pine Grove forever. The only question was, who would be left standing when the dust settled? The night deepened, and somewhere in the darkness, a trap waited to be sprung. But traps work both ways, and Ryan Blake had learned long ago that the best defense was a devastating offense. The war for Pine Grove Soul was about to begin its final chapter. The neon sign of the Steel Reapers clubhouse cast a sickly red glow across Ryan's face as he approached the entrance. Music thumped from inside. Heavy metal turned up too loud, probably to cover conversations that shouldn't be overheard. Two burly guards flanked the door, their hands resting meaningfully on concealed weapons. I'm here to see Kane, Ryan announced, keeping his voice neutral. His trained eyes had already cataloged multiple cameras, defensive positions, and potential escape routes. 3 motorcycles idling in the parking lot. Quick getaway vehicles. Amateur setup. You got some nerve showing up here, SEAL. One guard sneered, but spoke into his radio anyway. After a moment, he jerked his head toward the door. He's waiting. No weapons. Ryan submitted to a pat-down, allowing them to find the obvious pistol in his shoulder holster. They missed the ceramic blade in his boot, the garrote wire in his watch, the miniature recording device already broadcasting to a secure server. Some people never learned to properly search a combat veteran. The interior was exactly what Ryan expected, a monument to outlaw biker culture. Confederate flags hung beside Nazi memorabilia. Trophy wall of stolen license plates. Air thick with cigarette smoke and stale beer. About 20 gang members lounged around the main room, trying too hard to look casual. Kane Malone sat at a raised table in the back, positioned like a king holding court. The gang leader's muscular frame filled out his leather vest impressively, but Ryan noted the slight favor to his left side. Old injury, possibly from that operation in Eastern Europe. Well, Kane's cultured voice carried across the suddenly quiet room. The prodigal SEAL returns. I'm touched you accepted our invitation. Wasn't much of an invitation. Ryan moved to the center of the room, positioning himself to keep as many hostiles as possible in view. But since we're all here, let's talk about Chief Warren's retirement fund. A ripple of tension passed through the gathered bikers. Vince, sporting fresh bruises from their last encounter, cracked his knuckles meaningfully. You've been causing quite a stir in our quiet little town, Kane observed, taking a slow sip of whiskey. Stalking my men, interfering with business, teaching your sister some very unladylike habits, better than the habits you've been teaching the police force. Kane's smile didn't reach his eyes. Come now, Brother Blake. Surely we can reach an understanding. We're not so different, you and I. Both military men. Both understand how the world really works. We're nothing alike. Ryan's voice hardened. I serve my country. You betrayed yours. Ah yes, the patriot. Kane set down his glass carefully. Tell me, how did that work out in Syria? When your team walked into that ambush? When good men died because someone up the chain sold them out? The words were calculated to provoke, but Ryan had been expecting them. Like the intel you sold? Amazing how much classified information a corrupt small-town police chief can access with the right connections. That hit home. Kane's facade cracked slightly, genuine anger bleeding through. You have no idea what you're dealing with, Seal. This is bigger than your little family drama. We own this town. The police, the courts, the business owners, they all answer to us now. Not for long. Ryan reached into his jacket, causing several gang members to tense. He withdrew a thumb drive. Everything's here. Financial records, surveillance footage, witness statements. The Pine Grove Gazette gets it all tomorrow morning. Unless you pack up and leave. Take your operation somewhere else. Never come near my family again. Laughter erupted around the room. Ugly, anticipatory laughter. Kane raised his hand for silence. Counteroffer, he said smoothly. We beat you to death right here. Dump your body in the lake, and send pieces of that thumb drive to your sister as a reminder of why people don't fuck with the Steel Reapers. Ryan sighed, as if disappointed. I was hoping you'd say something like that. Take him. The first 3 gang members moved simultaneously, thinking to overwhelm him with numbers. Ryan's SEAL training kicked in automatically. Duck the first punch, trap the arm, use the attacker's momentum to throw him into his friends. Create space. Control the engagement. A pool cue whistled through the air where his head had been. Ryan caught it on the backswing, yanking the wielder off balance and driving a knee into his solar plexus. The man went down retching. Is this really how you want to play this? Ryan asked conversationally, deflecting another attack and responding with a precise strike to a nerve cluster. The attacker dropped, leg temporarily paralyzed. More gang members joined the fight, but they were street brawlers facing a combat veteran. Ryan moved with economical grace, each motion calculated for maximum effect. A throat strike here, a joint lock there. He used their numbers against them, letting them get in each other's way. Vince charged in with a knife, wild with rage. Ryan disarmed him with a technique taught in SEAL training, breaking 2 of the enforcer's fingers in the process. The knife went spinning across the floor. Enough! Kane's voice boomed as he drew a pistol. You think this changes anything? You think beating up a few bikers proves something? No. Ryan knocked out another attacker with an elbow strike. But your confession might. Kane's eyes widened as he realized what the thumb drive distraction had hidden. The active recording device capturing every word. Kill him. Kane's carefully cultured accent cracked. Kill this bastard now. But Ryan was already moving. A flashbang grenade, one of several weapons the guards had failed to find, detonated with disorienting brilliance. By the time the gang members could see again, Ryan had vanished through a pre-scouted escape route. Pursuit was immediate and aggressive. Motorcycles roared to life as Ryan sprinted through back alleys, making use of the urban warfare training that had kept him alive in dozens of combat zones. Over a fence, through an abandoned building, using the terrain to break line of sight. The sound of engines split up, trying to cut off his escape routes. Amateur move. They didn't understand that the prey was actually the hunter. One bike came screaming around a corner, rider already raising a weapon. Ryan clotheslined him at precisely the right height to avoid lethal injury while ensuring unconsciousness. The motorcycle crashed harmlessly into a dumpster. 2 more riders fell for a simple cable strung at neck height, another trick learned in urban combat training. The rest gradually lost his trail as Ryan worked his way through a series of pre-planned evasion routes. By the time he made it back to Sarah's house, his body was a mass of bruises and minor cuts. Nothing serious, but dramatic enough to make his sister gasp when she opened the door. "Oh my God, Ryan." Sarah pulled him inside, already reaching for the first aid kit. "What happened? What did you do?" "What needed to be done?" Ryan winced as she cleaned a cut above his eye. "Got Kane on recording, confessing everything. The whole operation, the police corruption, all of it. Was it worth this? Sarah's hands trembled slightly as she applied butterfly bandages. Looking like you went 10 rounds with a meat grinder? Ask me again tomorrow when Lisa's story breaks. Ryan checked his phone, confirming that the recording had transmitted successfully to his secure server. This is the beginning of the end for the Steel Reapers. Sarah didn't look convinced. They'll retaliate. You know they will. Let them try. We got them on the defensive now. Once the public knows the truth. Mom? Ethan's voice drifted down from upstairs. Can I have some water? Stay here, Sarah ordered Ryan. Try not to bleed on anything. Ryan listened to his sister's footsteps ascending the stairs, followed by the familiar sounds of maternal comfort. Ice cubes clinking in a glass. Soft voices discussing bad dreams. The normal routines that he'd missed during his years away. His phone buzzed. Lisa Jean calling. Tell me you got it, the reporter said without preamble. Uploading now. Everything we needed and more. Kane lost his cool, started bragging. Classic narcissist mistake. This is incredible. Lisa's voice was excited but professional, combined with the financial records and witness statements. Ryan, this is going to blow Pine Grove wide open. The story runs first thing tomorrow. Good? Just be careful. They'll. A scream from upstairs cut him off. Sarah's scream? Ryan was moving before his conscious mind processed the sound, taking the stairs 3 at a time. Ethan's bedroom door was open, the window glass shattered. Cold night air carried the sound of motorcycles rapidly receding into the distance. Sarah stood in the middle of the room, clutching a piece of paper in shaking hands. Ethan was gone. The note was simple, written in block letters. Back off, or the kid dies. You have 24 hours. The war for Pine Grove had just become deeply, terrifyingly personal. And Ryan Blake was about to show the Steel Reapers why taking his nephew was the last mistake they would ever make. Ryan? Sarah's voice was barely a whisper. What? What are we going to do? Ryan was already moving, checking the broken window for evidence, his mind shifting into full combat mode. We're going to get him back. And then I'm going to dismantle the Steel Reapers piece by piece. But first, he had a call to make. His old SEAL team would want to know that someone had just kidnapped one of their own. The Steel Reapers thought they knew about violence, about intimidation, about power. They were about to learn what real warriors could do when family was at stake. The night wasn't over, and it was about to get very, very dark for the Steel Reapers. Sarah sat at her kitchen table, staring at Ethan's empty chair. The house felt wrong without his presence. Too quiet, too still. Dawn was breaking outside, marking 12 hours since the kidnapping. This is my fault, she whispered, her voice raw from crying. If I hadn't called you. Stop. Ryan looked up from his laptop, where he'd been monitoring the tracking devices planted throughout Pine Grove. The only people responsible for this are Kane and his gang. And they're about to learn why you don't take a SEAL's family. His phone buzzed. A text from Torres. Teams assembled. 30 minutes. The tracking data was painting a clear picture. After the confrontation at the clubhouse, most of the Steel Reapers had converged on an abandoned textile factory on the outskirts of town. The building's power usage had spiked in the last few hours, suggesting increased activity. I've found him, Ryan announced, showing Sarah the satellite image. The factory has good visibility, minimal approach routes. They think it's defensible. You're going in after him. Sarah's voice shook slightly. We are. Ryan emphasized the word. I'm not alone this time. As if on cue, vehicles began arriving. Unmarked SUVs carrying men who moved with military precision. Ryan's old SEAL team, answering the call without hesitation. Mike Torres entered first, his dark features set in grim determination. Like old times boss. Though usually our hostage rescue ops had better weather. The others followed. Johnson, Rodriguez, Cooper. Veterans of a dozen combat zones. Men who had fought beside Ryan in the world's worst places. They carried specialized gear in nondescript duffel bags, their civilian clothes unable to hide their warrior bearing. Sarah, meet the team, Ryan said as the men set up their equipment on the kitchen table. The best operators I've ever served with. Ma'am, Torres nodded respectfully. We'll get your boy back. That's a promise. The next hour was spent in detailed planning. Satellite images were studied. Entry points identified. Contingencies discussed in the clipped language of professional soldiers. Their numbers? Johnson asked, checking the action on his suppressed weapon. 20, maybe 25, Ryan replied. Mostly amateur thugs, but Kane's ex-military. He'll have organized some basic defense. Points of entry? Loading dock on the east side's our best bet. Rodriguez, you'll take the high ground here. Ryan pointed to a neighboring building. Cooper, your team covers the exit routes. No one gets away this time. What about the police? Sarah asked quietly. Lisa's story breaks in 1 hour. Ryan checked his watch. Between that and the evidence we planted, Warren and his corrupt officers will be too busy saving themselves to interfere. Inside the factory, 8-year-old Ethan Mitchell was trying to be brave. Uncle Ryan had taught him that staying calm was important in dangerous situations. So he observed his captors, just like they'd practiced in their spy games. The bikers were nervous, arguing among themselves. Ethan counted 12 men that he could see from where they tied him to a chair. Some paced, others cleaned weapons. Vince nursed his broken fingers and glared at nothing. Kane stayed apart, speaking urgently into a phone. Warren's not answering. I don't care about the newspaper. We hold the kid until Blake backs off. Ethan remembered more of Ryan's lessons. Create distractions. Stay aware of surroundings. Look for opportunities. I have to go to the bathroom, he announced loudly, making his voice shake just enough to sound scared. Shut up, kid, one biker growled. But I really have to go. Ethan added a little wiggle to his performance. Please. The bikers exchanged uncertain looks. None of them had signed up for babysitting duty. Fine, Vince snapped. Take him. But watch him close. As the biker untied him, Ethan memorized the route to the bathroom, counting steps and noting landmarks. Uncle Ryan had taught him that too. Outside the factory, Ryan's team moved into position under cover of pre-dawn darkness. Rodriguez set up his sniper nest while Cooper's team secured the perimeter. No one would slip away this time. Audio surveillance is live, Torres reported through their tactical radio network. Counting 14 tangos on the main floor. Plus Kane and 2 guards of the kid, Ryan checked his weapon one final time. Remember, we go quiet until we have eyes on Ethan. Then we light it up. The assault began with perfect silence. Ryan and Torres approached the loading dock, their movements synchronized by years of combat experience. The first guard died without a sound, a garrote wire ending his watch. Inside, Ethan was being led back from the bathroom when the lights went out. Emergency generators kicked in, casting the factory floor in dim red light. What the hell? Vince raised his gun, scanning the shadows. A whisper of movement, a muted cough of suppressed gunfire. 2 more bikers dropped. We're under attack, someone shouted. The factory erupted into chaos. Ryan's team moved like ghosts through the darkness, their night vision giving them perfect clarity while the gang members fired blindly into shadows. Years of SEAL training made this almost too easy. These weren't hardened fighters, just bullies with guns. Boss! Torres's voice crackled in Ryan's earpiece. Kane's moving, taking the kid up to the office level. Copy. Ryan changed direction, leaving his team to handle the remaining resistance. This was personal now. He found them in what had once been the factory manager's office. Kane held Ethan in front of him like a shield, a pistol pressed to the boy's head. That's far enough, Blake. Kane's cultured voice had lost its smooth edges. One more step and... Uncle Ryan. Ethan's voice was steady, his eyes clear. He's favoring his left side. Ryan smiled proudly, as Kane's eyes widened in surprise. The moment of distraction was all he needed. The fight was brutal and swift. Kane was good, his military training evident in every move. But Ryan was fighting for family, and that made all the difference. They crashed through a glass partition, trading brutal strikes. Kane's size advantage counted for little against Ryan's precise SEAL combat techniques. A knee strike to that weakened left side, an elbow to the jaw, a precise throw that sent Kane crashing into a desk. It's over, Ryan said as Kane struggled to rise. Your operation's finished. Warren's going down. Give up while you can still walk. You think this ends with me? Kane spat blood. This is bigger than Pine Grove. We have connections. Had connections, Ryan corrected, advancing steadily. Amazing how quickly people abandon ship when the evidence goes public. Check your phone. Kane's eyes flickered to his fallen phone, now displaying news alerts. Lisa's story had broken right on schedule, complete with financial records, surveillance footage, and recorded confessions. With a roar of desperate rage, Kane charged. Ryan met him head-on, their final exchange lasting seconds, but containing years of combat experience. When it ended, Kane lay unconscious and Ryan stood unsteadily, favoring bruised ribs. "Uncle Ryan?" Ethan's small voice came from behind an overturned filing cabinet. "Did we win?" Ryan smiled through split lips. "Yeah, buddy. We won. You did great, by the way. Perfect timing with that distraction. I remembered what you taught me." Ethan rushed to hug his uncle. "Stay calm. Observe everything. Wait for the right moment." Torres appeared in the doorway, his weapon still at ready. Building secure. Cooper's team caught 3 trying to run. Police are finally showing up, the honest ones looks like. And boss, you're gonna want to see this. On the factory floor, chaos reigned. State police were taking gang members into custody while FBI agents cataloged evidence. And there, being led away in handcuffs, was Police Chief Gerald Warren. "Try to run," Torres explained with satisfaction. "Right into our outer perimeter." Cooper's team found him with a bag full of cash and a one-way ticket to Mexico. "Mom!" Ethan's shout drew their attention to the factory entrance, where Sarah stood with more state police. Mother and son ran to each other, their reunion bringing tears to the eyes of even hardened SEAL operators. "Thank you," Sarah mouthed to Ryan over Ethan's head. He nodded, watching his sister hold her son while police and federal agents dismantled the Steel Reapers operation piece by piece. Lisa Zhang arrived with news cameras, capturing the arrest for posterity. Her story had blown the case wide open, exposing not just local corruption, but links to international weapons trafficking and drug distribution networks. "Mr. Blake," Lisa called out, holding up her phone, "the FBI is announcing a multi-state operation based on your evidence. They're rolling up Steel Reapers chapters across 3 states. Ryan barely heard her. He was watching Sarah and Ethan, seeing the relief and joy on their faces. This was what he'd been fighting for, not just justice or revenge, but family. The chance to finally be the brother and uncle they deserved. "Ryan." Sarah's voice brought him back to the present. "You're hurt. We should get you to a hospital." "I'm fine." He tried to wave off her concern, then winced as the movement pulled at his injuries. "Okay, maybe a quick checkup." "Heroes need band-aids too," Ethan said wisely, making the gathered SEAL team members chuckle. As dawn broke over Pine Grove, painting the sky in colors of hope, Ryan watched federal agents leading Kane and Warren towards separate transport vehicles. The gang leader and the corrupt chief avoided looking at each other. Their partnership ended in mutual betrayal. "What happens now?" Sarah asked softly. Ryan put an arm around his sister, watching Ethan excitedly show Torres his SEAL trident pin. "Now," Ryan smiled, feeling truly at peace for the first time in years. "Now we go home. As a family." The war for Pine Grove was over. The Steel Reapers were finished. Their reign of terror ended not by overwhelming force, but by the determination of a family that refused to be broken. And somewhere in the growing light of morning, a brother who had lost his way finally found his path home. Spring came early to Pine Grove that year, as if nature itself was celebrating the town's rebirth. The Steel Reapers clubhouse had been converted into a community center, its walls now bright with children's artwork instead of gang symbols. Where intimidating motorcycles once parked, families gathered for weekend farmers markets. Inside the Pine Grove Gazette's offices, Lisa Zhang's desk disappeared under an avalanche of awards and congratulatory letters. Her exposé had sparked a national conversation about small-town corruption, inspiring similar investigations across the country. Another interview request, she told Sarah over coffee. CNN this time. They're calling it the small town that fought back. But the real story is you, Sarah. You and your family. Sarah shook her head, watching people stroll freely down Main Street through the cafe window. "We just refuse to be afraid anymore." The rest was all Ryan. "Speaking of your brother," Lisa's eyes twinkled. "How's he handling his newfound celebrities?" The answer came from outside, where Ryan was attempting to slip unnoticed past a group of admirers. Ever since the arrests, He'd become something of a local legend, the hometown hero who took down a criminal empire. Children played Navy SEALs versus Steel Reapers in their backyards, with Ryan Blake as the main character. He hates it, Sarah laughed. Says he'd rather face another gang than give another newspaper interview. The federal investigation had revealed the full scope of Kane's operation. The Steel Reapers had been part of a multi-state criminal network, using small towns like Pine Grove as distribution hubs. Police Chief Warren's cooperation had led to dozens of arrests, including several high-ranking officials in neighboring counties. But for Sarah, the most important changes were the smaller ones. Walking down the street without looking over her shoulder. Sleeping through the night without fear. Seeing Ethan laugh freely again. She found Ryan in their backyard that afternoon, teaching Ethan how to properly grip the new baseball but they'd bought to replace his broken action figures. Remember, Ryan was saying, it's all about control. Just like those focusing exercises we practiced. Sarah watched them from the kitchen window, marveling at how naturally they'd bonded. The awkward uncle who'd barely known how to talk to his nephew was gone, replaced by a patient mentor who seemed to grow younger in Ethan's presence. "Mom," Ethan called out, spotting her. "Uncle Ryan's teaching me batting. He says it's just like the hand-to-hand combat they taught him in SEAL training." "Is that so?" Sarah raised an eyebrow at her brother, who had the grace to look sheepish. "A modified version," Ryan clarified. "Very modified." Later, after Ethan had gone inside to do homework, Sarah found Ryan sitting on the back steps, staring at the spot where the Steel Reapers had once set fire to their lawn. "Penny for your thoughts?" She sat beside him. "Just thinking about time," Ryan said quietly. "All those years I stayed away, thinking I was protecting you from my demons, when really, I was just running from myself." Sarah leaned against his shoulder, like she had when they were kids. "You came when it mattered most. That's what counts. I should have been here when Mark died." Ryan's voice caught slightly. "Should have helped you through that. Instead, I buried myself in missions, telling myself I was making the world safer while my own family struggled. And now, Ryan smiled slightly. "Now I think maybe it's time to stop running." The conversation was interrupted by Ethan bursting out the back door, waving a permission slip. "Mom, Uncle Ryan, can we go? Please." The school was organizing a father-son camping weekend. In previous years, Sarah had made excuses for why Ethan couldn't attend. This time, she looked at Ryan questioningly. "What do you say, Uncle Ryan?" Ethan's eyes shone with hope. "Will you take me camping?" Ryan's face softened. "Wouldn't miss it for the world, buddy." The camping trip became a turning point in their relationship. Under the stars, Ryan shared carefully edited stories about his missions, teaching Ethan about courage, loyalty, and the true meaning of strength. They built fires, tracked wildlife, and talked about Mark, the father Ethan barely remembered but whose values lived on through his uncle. "Your dad would be so proud of you," Ryan told his nephew as they roasted marshmallows. "The way you handled yourself when the Steel Reapers had you. That was real bravery." "I was scared," Ethan admitted. "But I remembered what you taught me about staying calm. Being brave doesn't mean not being scared. It means doing what's right even when you are scared." Back in town, Sarah was discovering her own kind of courage. During a staff meeting at Carter Insurance, she challenged the company's handling of recent claims, presenting a detailed analysis of how they could better serve their clients. "Impressive work, Mitchell," her boss said afterward. "We've been looking for someone to head up our new customer advocacy department. Interested?" The promotion came with a substantial raise and flexible hours. For the first time since Mark's death, Sarah could breathe easier about their finances. She celebrated by buying Ethan new school clothes, no more patched knees or too short sleeves. One evening, she found Ryan packing his duffel bag. "Time to move on?" she asked, trying to keep her voice neutral. "Maybe." Ryan folded a shirt with military precision. "Got some job offers. Private security consulting. Government contracts. Good money. And far away from here." Ryan paused, looking around the room he'd been calling home. Photos covered the walls now, new ones, showing him with Ethan at the camping trip, at baseball games, building model planes together. "Unless," Sarah hesitated, "unless you had a reason to stay, such as a sister and nephew who'd miss you, a town that could use someone with your skills training their new police force, a chance to build something instead of just fighting." Ryan's hands stilled on his bag. I'm not good at normal life, Sarah. Never have been. Who said anything about normal? Sarah smiled. But maybe it's time to find out what peace feels like. The decision was celebrated at the town's annual summer festival, an event that had been suspended during the Steel Reaper's reign but was now restored with extra enthusiasm. The mayor insisted on honoring Sarah with a community service award, recognizing her role in inspiring the town to stand up to corruption. Mrs. Mitchell's courage, the mayor announced to the gathered crowd, reminded us that true strength isn't about intimidation or violence. It's about standing up for what's right, protecting your family, and never losing hope. Sarah accepted the award gracefully, but her eyes sought out Ryan in the crowd. Her brother stood at the back, uncomfortable with attention as always, but his pride was evident in his smile. That night, they had a private celebration at home. Sarah cooked their father's famous lasagna recipe, while Ethan set the table with their good dishes, the ones that had been Mark's wedding gift to them. Ryan paused by the mantel, where a photo of their father stood in uniform. Robert Blake had served as a Marine, instilling in his children a sense of duty and honor that had shaped both their lives. He would have loved this, Sarah said softly, joining her brother. Seeing his family together again. I miss him, Ryan admitted. Miss his advice. Remember how he always said family was the one thing worth fighting for. You proved him right. Sarah squeezed his hand. You came home and fought for us. And now we fight to stay together. To heal. To build something good from everything that happened. Ethan bounded into the room, proudly wearing his uncle's sealed trident pin on his new baseball cap. Mom, the lasagna's bubbling. Can we eat? They gathered around the table, passing dishes and sharing stories. Ethan excitedly described his latest baseball game, where Ryan had helped him hit his first home run. Sarah talked about her plans for the customer advocacy department. Ryan admitted he was considering the police training position. To family, Sarah raised her glass in a toast. To second chances, Ryan added. To Navy SEALs. Ethan chimed in, making them all laugh. Later, after Ethan had gone to bed, Ryan and Sarah sat on the back porch, watching fireflies dance in the summer darkness. The night was peaceful, free from the rumble of motorcycles or the weight of fear. You know, Sarah said thoughtfully, when I called you that night, I was just hoping for protection. I never imagined we'd get our brother back, too. Ryan looked at the stars, remembering similar nights in combat zones when these same stars had been his only connection to home. I never imagined I'd find what I was really fighting for all those years. It was here all along. From inside came the soft ticking of the grandfather clock, a sound that had marked time in their childhood home, now restored to its place in Sarah's living room. Its steady rhythm seemed to promise many more peaceful evenings, many more family dinners, many more chances to be the family they were always meant to be. The war for Pine Grove was over. The healing had begun, and in a small house on a quiet street, three people who had faced down evil together were discovering that the strongest weapons against darkness were love, courage, and the unbreakable bonds of family. Ryan Blake, the warrior who had traveled the world fighting other people's battles, had finally found his most important mission, being the brother and uncle his family needed. And in that mission, he had found something he never expected to find again. He had found his way home. What would you do to protect the ones you love? How far would you go when everything that matters hangs in the balance? If this story of family, redemption, and justice resonated with you, make sure to hit like and subscribe for more gripping tales of ordinary people facing extraordinary challenges. Leave a comment sharing what you thought about Ryan's transformation from a distant warrior to the uncle and brother his family needed. Sometimes the biggest wars aren't fought on foreign battlefields, but right in our own backyards. And sometimes the most important victories are won not with weapons, but with the courage to stand up for what matters most. Stay tuned for more stories that will keep you on the edge of your seat.